Very good evening all of you. So I hope all of you are perfectly well and preparing for your exams. So in this session of Anthropology Optional, I'm going to discuss with you the concept of human growth and development. Right. We cannot cover the entire topic because it is too big to cover. So I will take some a brief overview of this topic and some of the previous year questions and some of the expected questions that you can expect from this topic. I will try to give you brief insights in this topic, that how you should think, how you should prepare, right? How you should write an answer from if at all any question come from this topic. And you know that I picked up this topic for you because there was a question last year. Secular trends in human growth can be positive, negative or neutral. Illustrate with example. 20 marker question in 2020 paper 1 anthropology, right? So that is why I thought that many of the people cannot understand and comprehend this question, and I again and again say this thing, that why you cannot comprehend such questions, because you don't anticipate, you don't expect, you don't cover the paper thoroughly and comprehensively, right? Most of the students, they just cover this anthropology superficially. They study hardly 200 to 250 topics and they consider that anthropology is done. Basically, we must have a deeper understanding of the topic, and if at all, if the question is a little bit tricky, so you should be able to address it. This question was not at all tricky, right? It was a very well expected question. I taught this question last year to my students, and most of them, they can very well address this question without any difficulty. So again, here we are going to discuss that question particularly. But before going to this question or any other question, let me take a brief overview of this chapter, human growth and development, right? So human growth and development. You people, hear both these terms in your general studies also, right? Growth, economic growth, population growth, right? Economic development, sustainable development, sustainable growth, green growth. You hear these terms, right? And here our focus will be on the growth of humans, right? How we grow from a single cell, right? When the ovum and sperm meet, right? So there is a zygote, and how this single zygote turns into a complete human being, right? So in this process, both in this process of making of this human from a single cell, you can take the analogy that we say that Earth also, or you can say our universe, Big Bang theory says, came from a single tiny ball, right, of indefinite mass and density and naturally energy, right, which exploded. So similarly, we humans also came from a cell, and then a complete human of multiple cells, multiple organs, multiple tissues, and we are complete being, a system which is integrated and interacting continuously. Now basically in this process both growth and development is included. So you must understand that what is growth and what is development. Are both of these terms similar or different? Since we have written here that growth and development, that means they are not similar, but at multiple places we use these terms interchangeably, right? Sometimes we say the growth and development are one and the same, but they are not one and the same, they have some differences. Now, growth, if you say, growth is simply increase in height, weight, right? Or you can say the physical dimensions of human body or our organs or the complete set of this body is growth. So it is the physical increase. That means it is quantitative, right? We can measure growth very easily. Development, on the other hand, it is qualitative. It is increase in functionality, right? It can be biological, it can be cognitive, and it can be psychosocial, right? So development is much complex thing. It not only includes this, it may or may not be associated with growth. ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है that growth is mandatory for the development, right? Development को you can understand like this, that a child initially, the child starts sitting up, so that's a development. This child starts speaking, right? That is a development. Then you can see development in this sense that a child, or you can say children grow into the adolescence, right? There is development of secondary sexual characteristics, so that is a development. Okay, so these two terms are not one and the same, rather they are different. Okay. Now, there are many people who defined these terms, right? Watson and Lowery, they defined that growth means increase in physical size of whole or any of its part. Similarly, Juan Cumas was a very famous physical anthropologist who did his work on human growth and development. He did his work on race and raciology. He was very instrumental in drafting that UN draft on races also, right, on the discrimination on the basis of race, right. So Juan Cumas, he defines it as the objective manifestation of hypertrophy and hyperplasia. Now these terms you are listening for the first time: hypertrophy and hyperplasia. And this definition tells us something much deeper about the growth, right? So it is an objective manifestation of hypertrophy and hyperplasia of the organism constituent tissues and is determined by the postnatal body size, right? The increase in body size is limited to the predetermined constitutional and hereditary factors. It is, however, influenced by exogenous factors like diet, climate, race and environment, right. So basically Juan Kumar says that growth is limited by both genetic factors and environmental factors. So his definition is a little bit deeper, right, because he gives us insight on multiple issues, right, that concern human growth. Okay, so he's talking about hereditary factors, right, and the exogenous factors, you can say environmental factors, okay, which controls or you can say regulates growth, right. So growth, you can say how growth occur. Growth, or you can say physical increase in size, can occur through hypertrophy. That means increase in cell size. Chota cell hai, so increase in cell size, the same size, grow in size, this is hypertrophy. The other mechanism can be, suppose there were 2 cells earlier, so now there are 4 cells. That is hyperplasia, right. And there is another process that is also involved, that is accretion. And what this accretion is, accretion means, see, cells are not lying in the our body like anything. They are connected, right. So within the cells also there is something, right. So within the cell there is intercellular, or you can say इनके बीच में कुछ फ्लूइड होता है, राइट? दैट फ्लूइड, इंक्रीज इन दैट फ्लूइड, ओके, दैट इज accretion. So growth by accretion. Within it, if it will increase, then it is naturally hypertrophy because cell size बड़ा हो जाएगा. But cell के बीच का जो substance है, अगर यहाँ पे growth होगी, that is the growth due to accretion. All these factors, right? These two factors were suggested by Juan Kumar, a Spanish Mexican physical anthropologist, and these three were enlisted by Melina and her group, right? So these are the three factors that, according to Melina, are responsible for growth. Development, on the other hand, is basically enhancement of the functionality of our body. It is, you can say, it may lead to change in the form or shape, right? It may or may not be associated with growth, but it certainly associated with the increased functionality or the functional capacity of the body, right? It is associated with the functional specialization or differentiation, right? That differentiation may take place at the cellular level, at the organ level or the tissue level, or at the complete body level, right? So here you can understand, I believe that you can understand and make out a difference between growth and development. We are dealing with these two concepts. Why I am dealing with these two concepts and I am naming these scholars also? Because there can be sometime a 10 marker growth and development. This is the question only, right? So how will you write it? So you must have sufficient fodder for it. Okay. So development is the increase in functional capacity in perfect form resulting from production of specialized tissues from unspecialized ones, right? तो यहाँ पे सिर्फ increase नहीं हो रहा cell number या cell का size या फिर intercellular fluid, rather यहाँ पे unspecialized से specialized की तरफ cell या tissue का movement हो रहा है, right? You can say this zygote turn into a tiny human body, right? Basically होता क्या है? The earliest stage up to 2 weeks is zygotic stage, right? That means 14 days. Up to 8 weeks is the embryonic stage, right? At that, here it is conception, zygotic stage, then up to 8 weeks it is the embryonic stage, and at the end of this 8 weeks this zygote is completely differentiated into a human body, but it is just 1 inch, just 1 inch in size. Ye same zygote, it will be a tiny human, it will have all the things that we have. So post that, now what is this? That this may have a disproportionately large head, but all the parts are developed here, right? Everything is developed at the end of 8 weeks, and after 8 weeks what will happen? Only filling in will happen, right? बाकी जो organs हैं, tissues हैं, उनकी सिर्फ growth होगी यहाँ पे. ऐसा नहीं है कि कुछ नया बनेगा, right? Entire body is developed here, उसके बाद सिर्फ इनका development हो रहा है, right? So basically ये भी एक development है. From this zygote to making of the various body parts, it is differentiation, specialization of this cell into multiple specialized cell. It is a development, right? So what Juan Kumar says about development? So Juan Kumar says that development is a quality peculiar to living matter that carries it through the process of progressive evolution to a state of perfect function, right? So Juan Kumar, what he says, that it is quality which is peculiar to living matters, right? And that carries it through the process of progressive evolution. Progressive evolution की तरफ लेके जाता है to a state of perfect function, right? So you must understand these 2-3 things. Now, not only him, there are many other scholars who talks about the differences between the two, right? Although these are sometimes used, interchangeably, but still there are differences, right? And you can say that differences, the development can be at three major levels. It can be at biological level. 2, it can be at the cognitive level. And 3, it can be at the psychosocial level. See, एक बच्चा उतने अच्छे से झूठ नहीं बोल सकता जितना कि बड़ा बोल सकता है. एक बच्चा इतना सोशली समझदार नहीं होता है that he or she can make friends, right, and can have a longer chat. They have a limited vocabulary and they are not much mature, so they cannot make very good social relations, right? But a mature adult can. So here it is the development of this psychosocial ability, right? Similarly, cognitive abilities. बच्चा कब हाथ पकड़ना सीखता है, right? The child start grabbing things, walking, right? Running, all these, or you can say hand-eye coordination. सब कुछ motor skills का development, you can say, right? You can say the ability to think, right? Perceive information from the environment. All these abilities are development, right? So I believe you have sufficient knowledge on this growth and development. So if you have to write the differences or similarities or a short note on it, so how will you write it, right? So basically in the introduction, you can talk about that both of these are used interchangeably, right? But there are differences in both of them, right? And then you can talk about the differences at various levels in the definition, where you can quote one or two scholars. Then you can talk about in the general physical increase and what are the reasons for that general increase, right? So that can be hyperplasia, hypertrophy, and accretion. On the other hand, development includes the other factors that we have just discussed, and it can occur at multiple levels. Right, one is quantitative, one is qualitative, one can be measured, one cannot be measured. All these things you can discuss. Right, so this is about growth and development. Now, why do we study growth? Why do we study growth, and what this study of human growth is called as? Right, so this study of human growth is called as oxology. Some of you might be hearing this word for the very first time, and I would say don't get afraid that this is sometime that some people think कि पता नहीं क्या आ गया. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, right? किसी ने तो पहली बार, कभी तो मैंने भी पहली बार सुना होगा, कभी किसी और ने भी पहली बार सुना होगा. So it's, and it is not necessary and mandatory that you remember and know everything, because in mains you have this thing that you can choose what to write and what not to write, and definitely they are not going to ask you this term. So this term oxology is derived from two words, ox, Greek word, plus logos, right? Ox means to increase, right? So oxology is basically it's a study of all aspects of human physical growth. So it deals with all aspects of human physical growth, right? This oxology is highly a multidisciplinary science, right? Because you know that this physical growth, like if you, for example, take me or any other individual, so the growth, you can say general physical growth, this height, weight. So what are the factors that determine this height and weight? Just think about it. So I believe that you all know that the taller parents give rise to taller offspring, right? थोड़े से that perfectly built have relatively better kids, offsprings. So what that factor that I am talking about? That I am talking about is the genetic inheritance, genetic factor that regulates human growth, right? So oxology, naturally, that it also talks about genetics, right? It talks about the hormones also. So physical growth depends upon major two factors: biological factors These biological factors can be the genetic factors, and these can be the hormonal factors, right? Because we all know that growth hormone and other hormones, they regulate the human growth. And on the other hand, we have environmental factors, right? These environmental factors, you can think about the nutrition, you can talk about the general climate, you can talk about the cleanliness, right? And you can talk about any other kind of things, stress, social environment, political environment, right? Economic security, all of these factors that regulate physical growth. So naturally, if we talk about oxology, I just want to show you this integration of this with oxology, right? So physical growth ki study hai oxology. So naturally it deals with all these factors, right? So it's a meta science, it's an interdisciplinary subject or a science which deals with all of these factors, right? This factor can be medicine, or you can say medicine, health facilities, right, kind of public health amenities available, you can say kind of sanitation, clean drinking water, all these factors, right? The economic condition of that society, of that country, the kind of public health interventions, even the psychological factors influence. बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस में जो पेरेंट्स रहते हैं उनके बच्चों की ग्रोथ नहीं होती है, राइट? और बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस में कोई इंसान भी रहता है, कोई इंडिविजुअल भी रहता है, तो उसकी भी ग्रोथ हैम्पर होती है. So you must understand that. So I was just trying to show you this, what oxology is and what are the factors which control, or you can say which regulate the human growth and development, right? So what I was coming to the topic, that why do you study growth, right? Why we study human growth? What is our purpose, right? Because we are studying anthropology, and this anthropology we are not studying as an academic discipline or academic subject. No, our purpose here is to be a civil servant, right? And civil servant must know that how you study, whatever you study, how it can be useful for the society, right? Unless anything is useful, there is no, you may not get the desired marks also, right? So why do you study human growth? Let me tell you that what can be the possible areas or the dimensions that you should keep in mind. So James Tanner, a British anthropologist, and you can say medical professional also, who did elaborate work on human growth, right? बहुत जितने भी आप उनके charts वगैरह पढ़ेंगे, everything that you will find that it is from Tanner, जितनी भी books में देखेंगे, right? So James Tanner क्या कहते हैं? He says that a well-designed growth study is a powerful tool with which to monitor the health of a population or to pinpoint subgroup of a population whose share in economic or social benefit is less than it might be. Basically, it is a very powerful tool to monitor the health of a population. So by studying this human growth, you can understand the health of a population and what are the factors associated with the health, right? If there is stunting, right, among the children, so you can understand what are the factors which are responsible for growth, right? And if you understand the factors responsible for that, you can make interventions, right? You can make public health interventions. You can frame policies accordingly, right? So here you can quote him, and it is very important aspect. Growth is a very important aspect of biological anthropology, and indeed, because it tells us the differences among the populations and why these differences or the variations exist. So you must understand that anthropology is the study of variations, human diversity, and why the diversity exists. What are the fundamental reasons behind that diversity? It is the subject matter of anthropology, right? So if it is the subject matter of anthropology, naturally it is helpful in enriching the discipline of anthropology, right? And if you can understand this variety, these variations which are prevalent among the human populations, naturally you can make better interventions also, right? Because you know that one policy fit everywhere approach is not working anymore, right? So you have to make laws, policies and all these things according to the demand of the people. At the same time, this human growth and development, it throws a light on the evolutionary mechanisms also, right? It tells us the evolutionary mechanisms, human evolutionary mechanisms also. So that is also, it becomes important. कि कैसे evolution हो रहा है ये हमें पता लगता है through this human growth and development. Now, not only this, we can also know that the people living across the world belong to different races, and there are variations among them, right? So why does those variations exist in different, among various races? Are they genetically related or they are environmentally controlled? So we can understand the nature-nurture debate here. We can understand this nature-nurture debate. Nature means your genetics, your biology, whether this biology controls human growth or it is the nurture, you can say environmental factors control or regulate human growth. So we can understand that using this growth studies, right? So this is about something about growth and development. Now basically normally जो growth होती है हमारी, it is a orderly growth, right? Orderly हम ऐसा नहीं है कि एक दिन तो हम छोटे से थे और दूसरे दिन बहुत बड़े हो गए. No, it takes place orderly, धीरे धीरे gradually ये हम grow करते हैं, right? And there is a fixed time period over which we grow, and different species grow in a different manner. So what is the law of growth here? If I talk about the laws of growth, so it is orderly. Number one, it is orderly, right? What is other growth? See, growth में अगर आप देखोगे, so I told you that even within the mother's womb, in the zygote, you can say this embryonic stage, the head size was much larger than the other proportion of the body. Even when the child is born, the size of head is much larger. So basically, initially there is the growth of head, and then the other parts of the body grow. And now my head is smaller as compared to my other parts of the body. So this gradient in growth is known as cephalocaudal growth, right? From cephalus, head से और lower body की तरफ growth का gradient चलता है, growth move करती है. So this is cephalocaudal growth, right? Similarly, growth जो है वो अंदर से बाहर की तरफ होती है, right? You can say proximo-distal. That means the central parts of our body grows first, and then the development of lateral part or the distal parts. You can say this in my hand, this portion was developed first, grow first, and then in the last these fingers. and that is why the children have less developed finger, or you can say their grasp is not that strong. ठीक है, तो आप ये कह सकते हो proximo-distal है, growth is proximo-distal, right? And you can also say that different tissues, right? Different tissues, you can say nervous tissues, or you can say our tissues related to our nervous system, tissues related to our reproductive system, right? Lymphoid tissues, all these tissues grow at a different rate. ऐसा नहीं है कि सभी एक साथ grow होता है, right? So you can say different tissues grow at different rate, right? So these are some laws of growth. Now, how do you study growth, right? So studying growth, अगर आपको मेरा growth study करना है, how you can study me, my growth, right? So you can use some anthropometric techniques. Now, what are anthropometric techniques you must know. So what is anthropometry? Before that you must understand. What is anthropometry? So anthropometry is derived from two terms, anthropos and metre. That means measurement of body parts. Now ये measurement आप कैसे कर सकते हो? So एंथ्रोपोमेट्रिक टेक्निक्स यूज करके आप ग्रोथ को स्टडी कर सकते हो. बेसिकली आप 6 महीने का बच्चे का, यू कैन जस्ट टेक अ 6 month old child and you can measure the height, then you can measure the growth, height at 1 year, right? Then you can measure this at 1.5 years, 2 years. So basically what you are doing, you are measuring the body part, right? You are measuring the height, you are measuring the you can say weight also. Okay, so anthropometric techniques आप यूज करते हो. दूसरा आप टेक्निक यूज कर सकते हो, that is the X-ray technique. X-ray के हिसाब से आप skeletal maturity, बेसिकली हमारे बॉडी में कुछ ऐसे पार्ट होते हैं जो कि ओसिफाई होते हैं, जो कि एक एज के ऊपर जाके दे बेसिकली गेट ओसिफाइड. ओसिफाइड का मीन्स वो जमते हैं एक तरह से, राइट? सो दैट वी स्टडी यूजिंग द एक्सरे टेक्निक. ओके, so these are the two techniques. Now what kind of measurements, this anthropometric measurements we make? We make linear measurements, right? We make circumferential measurements. So in linear measurement you can say height. Okay, you can make circumferential. So circumferential measurement, you measure the circumference of chest, 56 inch ka सीना, right? Or you can say this bicep or waist. So this is another thing. And the third thing is pondrial. Pondrial means weight, right? Weight 6 महीने पे कितना था? At 6 months, at 1 year, 1.5 and so on. You measure these things. And on the basis of these measurements, we can understand that what is the rate of growth, right? And what is the tempo of growth, everything we can know using these things. So we can draw some growth curves using these data or these you can say statistics. Okay, so these are some techniques that are used to study growth. How you study growth, that why you study growth, you know now. And how you study, there is one more thing that I like to discuss with you, and from where there can be question also many times, right? So what are the methods to study growth, right? Methods to study growth. So there are basically these techniques that you use, right? Technique is a smaller thing because it is used on individual, but method is a little broader concept. Okay, so what kind of methods are used in anthropology to study human growth? So there are three main methods, right? One is longitudinal method, other is cross-sectional method, and the third is mixed longitudinal method. Mixed longitudinal method. Now, in longitudinal method, what happens? A scholar or an anthropologist, you can say, select some kids, right? Some kids are being selected. Maybe 20 kids are selected. 20 children are selected. So these 20 children were measured at different point in time. That means they were measured, the same children, these 20 only. Okay, you can take 2 or 3 if that is difficult for you to understand at this point in time. You can say once, these few children, you can say Sudhir, Satish, Sriram, right, or any other name. These all 6 people, they have been selected and they were measured at 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year and 6 year, right. So the same children are measured and up to a particular age, maybe 18 years, जब तक कि वो grow कर रहे हैं, right, तब तक वो हम measure कर रहे हैं, right. So this is one method in which you can know how these children are growing, what is the rate of growth, how much the growth achieved in a particular year, right, when did the growth spurt occur, right. ये सारी चीजें आप इस पे easily and perfectly you can understand because you have the same sample, same children here. So longitudinal growth, it is good, it is perfect, but there is one problem, is that suppose out of these children some moved out or some died, so your sample size reduced, right, and you cannot give your hypothesis, you cannot prove your theory using that, right, and your you yourself, your scholar or the researcher have to be engaged for at least 18 years. That is too long a time. The resources that are to be deployed here, the amount of money spent is too high. The amount of resources which are required to measure again and again, right? You have to convince the parents of these children. You have to convince the children all themselves जब वो बड़े हो जाएंगे. So बहुत मुश्किल है. Longitudinal study थोड़ा पैसा भी ज़्यादा लगता है, right? Costly भी ज़्यादा है, and it is less cost effective. That is why cross-sectional study is there, right? Cross-sectional method is there. So in this method, what happens? The researcher can select, a group of children of 1 year of age, 2 years of age, 3 years of age at one point in time, and they will measure all of them, right? And using that, he can tell the conclusion that this is the growth rate, or this is the kind of growth is happening. But in this, the perfection cannot be achieved, right? Because the kind of data that you can find here will not be the same, right? So, but it is cost effective. It can give immediate results. आप एक साल में पूरा result ले सकते हो. There you have to wait for at least 18 years, right? So that is the second and the easy way. It has its own disadvantages, right? Then there is mixed longitudinal, because you know that in longitudinal there are problems, right? What were the problem? There were, if some kid died or some X migrated, some were not convinced with the study and they are not willing to participate. They say, no, we will not participate. So in that case, those children can be replaced with the similar kids and then the study will be carried out. That is the mixed longitudinal study, right? So it is the combination of both longitudinal study and the mixed longitudinal study. I believe you got some understanding on this. Rest we will discuss in the class in detail by drawing the curves and all. Okay. Next, you may have heard some terms like catch-up growth. What is catch-up growth? I will be dealing with the two more topics. One is catch-up growth and one is the secular trend in the end. And that was the question that was asked in 2020. So what is catch-up growth? खाने वाला catch-up नहीं है ये. Right. This is catch-up. That means if you are lagging behind in your study because of anything, suppose you fall sick or something happen, you are not in the good mood to study for quite some time, right? So you are behind in your syllabus, you are lagging in your syllabus with respect to your peer group, right? So that you try to catch up, right? Similarly, some children may be lagging behind in growth, physical growth to their peers, and that can be because of some factors. That can be because of the malnutrition, that can be because of the disease, right? That can be due to any other stress related issue. So if some children, they are not able to carry with the growth because of these factors, but subsequently on given better nutrition, right, and by recovering the disease, they catch up the normal growth of their peer group. That is known as catch-up growth. Now, on catch-up growth, there have been studied by there have been studies by Tanner, Cullen, right? There was study on the Chile, Peru, and Cape Town by Alvear. There is study even in India by Satyanarayana, right? So these are the studies that shows that there are cross-sectional studies, right? So Cullen in 1982 says that comparing girls from 3 privileged schools, she studied the girls in Kenya, right, where there was a very high rate of malnutrition, right? So initially there was lesser growth. There was lesser growth in the childhood, but at the when these girls were given sufficient nutrition, right? When these girls were given sufficient nutrition, so their growth rate was matched up with the affluent girls, right? So that was a study by Cullen. So you can say that कैचअप ग्रोथ हो जाता है, ऐसा नहीं है कि आज स्टंटिंग है बचपन में, so there are no chances of revival, right, that they cannot match up. So basically measures, you can say, or the intervention measures, the public health measures can have significant results. That was shown by this study, right, on catch-up growth of the girls in Kenya by Cullen, right. Similarly, there was study by Alvear in 1986 on the children of Chile, Peru, and Cape Town, and there was also remarkable spontaneous catch-up growth when these inhibiting factors were removed, right, and sufficient nutrition was provided. Okay, this catch-up growth is not related only and only to, you can say, the physical growth, or you can say the size or weight, rather on the functional aspects or the developmental front also. So you can say the developmental factors, you can say the age of menarche, right? Age of menarche is the age at which the first menstruation occur, right? So this is also observed by Satyanarayana in India, right, in Hyderabad, Okay, then there is another study on catch-up growth by Adner. Okay, basically he says that there is a large potential for catch-up growth in children, even in pre-adolescent years. So basically what this concept of catch-up growth tells us, right? If there is stunting, if there is undernutrition, if there is wasting among the children, so the subsequent intervention measures can be helpful in ensuring the health of the population, right? So it is a useful concept for public health experts, and that is why we are studying it, right? Right. So the next topic I want to take is this topic of secular trends in growth. This was a question last year, right? I read out the question in the beginning of the class, right? That secular trend in human growth can be positive, negative or neutral. Illustrate with the examples. So what is the second secular trend in human growth? The word secular here, right? You normally hear secular. This is the word in our constitution also. So the secular, this word secular is you see in opposition to religious, right? Anything which is not religious is secular. So secular things are mainly material things, right? And what material things? You can just think about the material things like the kind of nutrition, kind of facilities, health facilities, all these factors, right? So the trend in growth because of these secular factors, right, influenced by these secular factors, is secular trend in growth. I believe this is clear to you people. Now you can come to the question. That question was that secular growth can be positive, negative and neutral. Illustrate with the examples. So the first thing that you should do in this, you should define it. I am telling you how you will be writing this answer, and my discussion will be according to the answer. I have told you just formally that what it is, secular, and growth I have discussed already. So in this trend means a kind of pattern which is there. So first thing that you are going to do in this question is you write the definition. Okay, so you do write the definition, and the definition you can quote some scholar. It is always better to quote some scholar. So you can write the definition given by James Tanner. I have told you James Tanner did elaborate work on human growth, right? So he wrote a book, A History of Study of Human Growth. In that book, he wrote, secular trend denotes both the tendency to get larger, right? It is the tendency to get larger and tendency to become early maturing. Early maturing, that means maturity pehle aa jati hai, right? So maturing means you can say it is somehow related to developmental aspect, right? Early maturing means you can say the onset of puberty is earlier, right? And these tendencies are usually linked. Okay, these tendencies are usually linked. That he says. Okay, not only this, you can simply say, if you don't remember the definition given by James Tanner, you can simply say the attainment of larger size and acceleration of maturation. Attainment of larger size and acceleration of maturation over the generations. How you can understand this secular trend in growth? just see that normally the generation from which you belong is relatively taller and heavier than your parental generation. The age of puberty is a little early in your generation than your parental generation. That is what we call secular trend in growth, right? Amitabh Bachchan से 2 इंच लंबा है अभिषेक बच्चन, that is secular trend in growth. अमिताभ बच्चन से थोड़ा हैवी भी है अभिषेक बच्चन, that is secular trend in growth, that you can say, right? So secular trend, and it is a general process, right, that you see in most of the developing countries, right? Either you apply in your own self, or you can apply in and around you, and that applies to all, right? Both the sexes, girls as well as boys, right? The girls and boys, they are getting taller and heavier in generation after generation. Now this change in the growth, right? Or you can say early maturity. This early maturity is, we are talking about the onset of puberty. Puberty means in girls and boys the appearance of secondary sexual characteristics, right? The onset of menarche, right? Or you can say the beginning of growing of mustaches in the boys, right? Pubic hairs, enlargement of breasts in the girls. So all these factors. So it is getting early. This is secular trend. Okay. Now the first thing we have discussed what it is. We have taken the definition. Now after the definition, when you have written definition, so after that you must write what are the factors responsible for it, right? What are the factors responsible for secular growth, or you can say factors influencing secular growth. So what can be the factors influencing secular growth? It can be nutrition, better nutrition, right? Better nutrition. You can talk about the better economic status, right? Nutrition is anyhow related to, better economic status also. Absence of pandemics, not absence, my apologies. Basically we are living in pandemic. So basically not large scale pandemics, right? Or you can say famines, right? Famines are not that, at least in most of the developing countries, they are free from famines and major pandemics except this one that in which we are living, right? So ये चीजें हम generally ले रहे हैं. Okay, so ये चीजें, availability of better public health amenities like sanitation facilities, clean potable drinking water, right? Then health facilities, right? You can say medicine, availability of doctors, and all these factors. Even this air conditioner, these air coolers, and kind of housing that we live in, this also had impact. How? Because suppose our body is deploying its energy in coping up with the environmental stress, कि गर्मी आ रही है, बरसात आ रही है, बीमार हो रहे हैं, right? All these things, if our body is using the energy in dealing with those stresses, right, naturally it will hamper growth. So those inhibiting factors have been removed. This air conditioner helps us to utilize our energy on the growth rather than coping up with the stress, right? So that is, you can say, the environmental intervention, the technological interventions, all these factors, or all these are the material factors that I told you in the very beginning also. All these are the material factors which are influencing the human growth, right? Rivers can also hamper the growth. So, right? So in one direction they will help in better growth, and if they are not there, better nutrition is not there, better, you can say, economic condition is not there, there are diseases, infectious diseases or any other diseases, there are famines or poor public health facilities, poor availability of doctors and all. So naturally it will hamper the growth. So negatively that will be negative growth, right? Negative trend in, negative secular trend in growth, right? And if it is available, then it is positive. Now, this is clear, I believe. Let us move on to the next. What you have to write in this. So after writing this, that this secular trend, right, it is not available, fully on everything. This secular trend in growth is, you have to understand the key pattern in this. So one scholar, Hospi and Cole, and other their colleagues, so they have studied that suppose better nutrition is available, so which body part is mostly affected? So legs gain maximum length, right? They observed that legs gained maximum length, maximum increase. They also observed that the maximum gain is during the childhood. They also observed that not only this growth, rather this is available in the age of menarche also. So these are some of their observations about the secular trend, or you can say the characteristic factors of the secular trend. So this, you can say, what are the characteristic of secular trend? So according to Hospi and Cole and their other colleagues, they say that legs are, legs gain maximum length or increase. Then you can talk about maximum increase was during the childhood, and then it is also associated with the age of menarche, right? Similarly, Stanley Gahn, right? She also noted that there has been generally a great increase in the leg length and size of hands, feet, faces and noses than in total stature. So you can say the characteristic according to Stanley Gahn. She also talks about the characteristic features of this secular trend. So the gain is mostly in leg, hands, feet, nose and faces, you can see, right? So these are some of the factors. Because it is a 20 marker, suppose you are going to write only that positive, negative and neutral, you will not have sufficient fodder and you will not get sufficient marks also, because the examiner expects from you that you must tell him or her about everything which is related to this topic, right? So the third heading is characteristics that you are going to write. After characteristics, you come to the types of secular trend and growth, or you can say secular trends can be typology, or you can say types. So it can be positive, negative and it can be neutral. Yes, I forgot to mention one thing here. When I was dealing with the factors influencing the growth, so basically I forgot, and let me tell you by telling you the example of Abhishek and this Abhishek Bachchan himself, right? See, Amitabh Bachchan is a tall man, right? And his wife may not be that much difference, but in दोनों में ऐसा है, right? And because their crossing, there is even taller and heavier son, right? So that is called as hybrid vigor. That is called as hybrid vigor, that means because of the migration and betterment in the facility of transportation and all, the people or the populations had mixed, intermixture हो गया populations का, and that intermixture of the populations also was responsible for this secular trend. This is another factor that I forgot to mention at that time. Right. So let's come back to our discussion here. Okay. So I was saying that it can be positive, it can be negative, and it can be neutral. So basically, we see that in India, we observe that our children are taller, heavier, and they mature early. And this increase in height, increase in weight, and early maturity is the positive secular trend in the growth. Right. So this positive secular trend is achieved in most of the developing countries which have improved their economic status over a period of time. Right. Now this was studied. Now यहाँ पे आपको यही end नहीं होता, because in anthropology you need to write case studies. Right. So here you can give case study, or you can study by Hospi himself, जो अभी हमने देखा था characteristics में, right? Hospi and Cole and his colleagues. Okay, so here they studied the secular trends in 17 nations: Europe, Japan, Cuba, Brazil, North America, and Taiwan. And they observed what they found, that Japanese experienced strongest secular trend, right, for the entire nation after World War II. What they have observed, Hospi and all, they observed that Japanese population experienced fastest secular growth, positive secular growth, right, and their general increase in this height, right, in the adult population was 2.67 centimeter per decade. 2.67 centimeter per 10 years per decade, right, and that they have observed from 1950 to 1995, right. So the average height in 1950s was 160, okay, and in 1995 it was 172, right. So this much increase, 2.67 centimeter per decade was the increase which was observed there by Hospi and Cole during their observation. And similarly, they have observed that in Sweden, Norway, this increase, it is their study itself, this increase was just 0.3 centimeter per decade. 0.3 centimeter per decade during the same time. And nowadays it is neutral. वहाँ पे these people in Norway, Sweden and all, they achieved their, biotic, you can say, blueprint जो provide कर रहा है, genetic blueprint, they have achieved that height or weight and all, right? So there is no much difference in them, in that, right? Similarly, in this positive trends, you can quote the example of Frank Boas, who studied migration effect, right? What is migration effect? He studied the populations which European populations which came to USA, right? And he observed their size, right? So during his study, Frank Boas' study, he observed the increase. He noted the secular trend, right, on almost all the children which were migrated from Europe to USA. Similarly, Sapiro Shapiro also studied this secular trend of Japanese migrants in USA, right? Japanese migrants in Hawaii, USA. Hawaiian island पे जब गए, so Japanese, their height was increased, their weight was increased, right? So that was also another case study for this migration, right? So that is the positive trend observed by Shapiro. Similarly, there is another examples. I believe that will be sufficient, 2 examples. Third, you can take Grulich. He also observed that Japanese children born and brought up in California, right? Grulich. He says that the Japanese children born and brought up in California, they were taller and heavier than their counterparts who were born and brought up in Japan, right? So these are some case studies that you can quote here. There are others that it will be available in our notes, right? If you can remember any 2-3 of them, that will be sufficient for your answer to address that. In negative trend, right? In negative trend, you can say the children or the next generation is shorter, lighter and maturing later, right? यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा था? Increase in height, increase in weight, and the third thing is decrease in the age of maturity, early maturing, right? But here in negative, all these things will be reversed, okay? And why it will be reversed? Because you must understand what were the factors, okay? What were the factors? So if you know about these factors, you can write here, right? So this negative trend, it was observed in Guatemala, right? And when there was intense civil war going on there, right, from 1974 to 1983, right? So all these factors were observed and they were studied by Bogin and Keep, right? So Bogin studied and his colleagues, they studied this negative trend in Guatemala population, and that was because of all these factors, right? So these you can write here, okay? Then after that, you can also write the neutral secular trend. So neutral secular trend, you can see that we can observe the neutral secular trend in those populations which have achieved their genetic potential or threshold, right? Suppose the genetic potential says that one person can grow 6.2, okay, but that population, the parental generation also have achieved that level because of betterment of all these conditions. So naturally you don't see much of the change in the next generations, right? So here you can see that it is neutral, and in most of the developed countries you can find that secular trend in growth is neutral, and these are studied by Malina, right? You can say, you can quote Malina, she studied that in many developed countries, right? So this is what your question was. We have given these examples, right? We have quoted these factors which are responsible for the secular trend. Now finally you have to conclude, and this conclusion you should write with significance of this study of secular trend, right? this significance of knowing that there can be positive, there can be negative, and there can be neutral. So it on one hand tells us about the nature-nurture hypothesis, that there are two major factors which are responsible for the growth. That is nature, that is the genetic blueprint or genetic threshold, and the environmental factors. Right? Here we are dealing with the environmental factors, but here this neutral tells us about the genetic factor also. Right? So that you can write here. Okay. One thing I just wanted to tell here. Yes, this understanding of these trends, secular trends, can be useful for public health interventions indeed. So you can quote that also. Right. This also says, this tells us that growth, human growth, is a biocultural phenomena. Right? It's a biocultural phenomena. That means it is influenced or regulated by biological factors as well as cultural factors. All these factors which we were dealing here, or the material factors that we were dealing here, were the cultural factors. So this is it from my side. I believe you must have enjoyed and gained some insight in all these topics. Right? We will meet again in 1 or 2 days. Right? And then we will discuss some other topic. Till then, thank you. Take care. All the very best.